On Life, Death, and Beyond, I'm honored to welcome Richard Martini. Richard is a multifaceted creator and author, director, producer, and award-winning filmmaker whose work spans across film, journalism, spirituality, and afterlife research. With such a diverse background, it's hard to capture the full depth of his contributions in just a few words. Throughout his career, he has collaborated with memorable actors, creatives, and influential figures while simultaneously following a path of spiritual inquiry, inspired by the passing of his close friend, Luana Enders. Richard co-hosts Hacking the Afterlife podcast with medium Jennifer Schaefer, who communicates with Richard's late friend, Luana Enders, a central figure who helps guide their discussion about spiritual communication, past life regression, first-hand accounts of the other side. Because of Richard's wide range of expertise, our conversation could have gone in many different directions. However, today, the conversation we focus mainly on Jesus and Richard's book, The Greatest Story Never Told, as told by Jesus and those who knew him, and includes a guided meditation where he leads to connect with Mary and Jesus in spirit. Learn more about Richard and his work at richardmartini.com. You can also find him across several social media platforms, including Medium, Facebook, and Instagram. Welcome, Richard. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you, Laura, and you're so kind to invite me on your podcast. How
You're
cool
welcome.
is that? Here we are. You know, I'm in the woods somewhere, based on my Zoom backdrop, and you are flying in with those magnificent wings. Those are very cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I know I love nature. Every time I'm not here with the wings, I'm in nature whenever I can get a chance. So,
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know, for your audience who may not be familiar with me at all, aside from your introduction, it was some years ago. I'm a filmmaker, and I grew up in Chicago, and I was working in the film business. I hope I still am working in the film business. And at some point, a very dear friend passed away, and then started visiting me. And I had the instant impression of, well, I must be imagining that. It must be made up. But then she started visiting other people and appearing to them, and sort of as I was hearing and saying the same things. And I thought, gee, it's funny, if she can come and visit me, how do we go and visit her? Because that means she must exist somewhere, as opposed to like worried about somebody in your other room or your house or something. It's like, oh, well, where are you? Where do you hang out? So that's when she had been a lifelong Buddhist. So I went to Columbia University. I took classes with Robert Thurman, a scholar in Tibetan philosophy. And I ended up going to Tibet with him and India. And what I learned was that Buddhism is very precise and specific in terms of the nature of reality. But when it comes to the nature of offstage reality, the afterlife, let's say, I found it wasn't as accurate as I was experiencing, because I was clearly having conversations with people no longer on the planet, but they hadn't dissolved or turned into a wisp, but they were clearly who they had been. And so then I ran into Michael Newton's work, Journey of Souls. And Michael was a hypnotherapist here in Los Angeles who had about 7,000 cases before he published his book, Journey of Souls, in 1994. And I picked up a copy of that book, and in that book, there was my friend Luana, that's my friend who passed away. She had told me that she had this recurring dream where she was in a classroom somewhere in another universe, in dreams, that everyone was dressed in white and they were speaking about things spirituality. She said, but they were speaking a language I'd never heard before, but somehow I understood. And when I picked up Michael Newton's book, there was that same description, somebody under hypnosis saying, I'm in a classroom and everyone's dressed in white. And so I thought, oh, maybe a documentary about Michael Newton, because cameras are so easy to, So I reached out to them and they were like, nah, Michael's retired. But we're having a conference in Chicago. You can come and film that. And in return, I said, I'll give you the footage of whatever I get. So I flew to my hometown, Chicago, and I met Michael. And after a few minutes, he said, I'll give you my last interview, which was kind of funny because he didn't pass away for another 16 years. But it was his last interview. And so I had done all of my research prior to that interview. And I asked him for 3 hours, everything I could. Then I interviewed his wife to see if what he was saying, she was saying the same thing. Because I asked her, like, what was it like when your husband came home and started talking about, between lives? And she said, oh, I thought he was nuts. I thought they were going to take him away. She said, until I heard the tapes. And I realized, oh, tapes. Yeah, of course. He's recording those. So then I'm thinking, well, if I can film those, I'll have a recording. And then I can see whether or not it's accurate or if people are being led or, what the process is. And then at some point, they invited me to do a session. And I thought, oh, that's great. Because now I can prove to myself that it's not accurate. Because I can't be led and I'm hyper aware of cameras and I didn't think I could ever be unconscious. Those are all misnomers because I'm sure you're aware of that, but in hypnotherapy, you're never not conscious. You're just letting your higher self drive the car, let's say. And so I had that experience of going to visit my counsel and meeting teachers and all the things that other people were talking about. And so that was a startling revelation for me. And I remember walking out of that room, 4-hour session, feeling as if the earth had shifted on its axis. And I then started filming people, sort of relentlessly, about 200 people so far in the past 12 years, I think. And it was fascinating because somewhere in the midst of those sessions, friends of mine who have no relation to this, not spiritual people, let's say, at all, they would agree, as an experiment, let's just see what happens, see where we go. And one close friend of mine saw herself living in Jerusalem in the year 18. And I said, Jerusalem, okay, did you ever, and then I had I'm filming. I had the hypnotherapist ask, did you ever go and see anyone speak in public? And within a few minutes, she was crying. She couldn't breathe. And she was seeing Jesus speaking to a crowd. And she was saying, I just feel this overwhelming love from him. And the odd thing about it was the night before I had been speaking to somebody at the Newton Institute, the former president, Paul Orend. And I was asking him about sort of the recurring image of things that he had in all of his cases. He had thousands of cases. And I was asking him, what's a recurring theme? And he said, people who knew Jesus or feel like they knew him. And I said, well, what did he look like? Did you ask? Because if everyone said he had red hairs and freckles, you'd know that you were talking to this. Anyway, because I said that joke. But the next day, my friend is now filming my friend who's seeing herself there. And he starts asking, what color are his eyes? What's his hair look like? And since then, I've used that as a rubric because I don't know if you're aware of it, but 15% of near-death experiencers see Jesus, whether they believe in him or not. And so I've found that I can go and speak to someone who had a near-death event and relive it, re-examine it, because it's outside of time. So it's like I ask them to go back to that moment, and now it's fresh, as if it's happening. And I can ask questions like, what does this person look like? What are they wearing? What color are their eyes? Is there anything unique about them? And when people started telling me that Jesus was showing up, my initial reaction was like, well, how do you know it's him? Is he wearing a name tag or, because there's so many different depictions of him, clearly blue eyes, brown eyes, etc. Right. And they all said, well, I just know, even if they don't, Hindu, didn't matter, people from different religions. One friend of mine said, I'm seeing Jesus, but I don't believe in him. And I was like, okay, let's just set that aside for a second. What does he look like? And then it was it was somewhere along in my journey. So I've been filming people under hypnosis for about, I don't know, 15 years now, something like that, maybe longer. That a medium reached out to me, Jennifer Schaefer, who I do a podcast with her, Hacking the Afterlife on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer works with law enforcement, FBI, NYPD, LAPD. So I know how effective she can be. And when I met her, I realized, oh my gosh, she's like a cell phone. I can just ask her to dial up people that I know, friends of mine. But when I first initially met her, I wasn't really sure what she was doing or what mediumship meant. And so I said, do you mind, I'm going to film you and I'm going to ask you some questions. And she was like, yeah, great. And so I did a session with her, and I ended up talking to Amelia Earhart, who was somebody that I'd been researching for decades.
Wow.
And I knew so much about what happened to her outside of what people think happened to her that I was startled that I was getting the exact same answers that I had researched and knew. And I had just been to Saipan, where she had been incarcerated. And Jennifer told me so many things that were in line with the research that I had already done, including the fact that when the American soldiers found her, they found a grave on Saipan and they dug her up. And I asked her, how did you die? Was it like I'd heard that you might have been shot, or it might have been something else? And her answer was, no, it was dysentery. And oh, by the way, those GIs who dug me up only found an arm. And I thought,
Wow.
that is so weirdly specific. I knew that Jennifer couldn't possibly know anything about the GIs who dug her up. It's an obscure detail. But just moments after that interview, I got a call from an NTSB investigator up in Seattle. Moments later, literally 5 minutes from Jennifer's office, this guy said, Rich, I just went through like 5 hours of research, top secret stuff from an investigator, and everything you told me about her being arrested and bringing the plane down to the Marshall Islands, all of that's in his files. He said, except when they dug her up, they only found an arm. And here was this guy saying word for word what I had just heard from the source. And later on, I discovered that these guys reported that in an article in the Chicago Tribune, like 1977. So put it this way, I was just aware of it. But within that session of filming Jennifer, at some point, she said, Jesus is here. And I thought, I'm looking around her office, like, where is she seeing him? But then she got overwhelmed and she started to cry and she couldn't breathe and her cheeks turned bright red. And that had happened to the friend of mine who had lived in Jerusalem or remembered living in Jerusalem in the year 18. The same thing. And she turned beet red. She couldn't breathe and tears. And so I said, can I ask him a question to Jennifer? And she said, he says yes. And I said, so what's going on? Why is it when you get close to people, they can't breathe? Their cheeks turn red and they start crying. And the answer, which is really unusual, she said, he says that I brought more of Source with me to this lifetime. And when people get close to me, they feel that unconditional love. And I thought, well, that's a really non-denominational answer. Like you could say to a scientist, it's not a religious answer in any stretch. The words, the nomenclature, all different. But I couldn't help myself. I said, well, not so much with the Romans. Meaning, clearly there were people in that army who, when they got close to you, they didn't feel that at all. And Jennifer said, I don't even know what that sentence means, but he's laughing. And so that was the first time I realized I could have an interaction with him or with whoever this person they were seeing, the person seeing. So since then, that was probably 10 years ago. And Jennifer and I have been doing our podcast every week, off and on, for the past 10 years. And over the course of those weeks, different people would tell me, I'm seeing him. And I would then say, well, can I ask him some questions? And then I go through I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy. but I go through all the questions that I have, and the predominant things that he says, and and I don't want to go into great detail, but he does say things like the Bible is metaphor. Because I'll ask, how serious are we supposed to take this book? It's metaphor. It's like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says all religions point to the same garden. And he says you don't have to follow me, but you can let me walk beside you as we walk each other home. Then then different people are saying him, and I'm asking like a myriad of questions, and he paints this alternate version of his life that's different. I mean, that he survived the crucifixion, that he had a family, that he moved to Kashmir. These are things that he consistently says through different people. And at some point, distracted, I said, why are you telling this alternate story of your life? And his answer was, to two different people, it's not alternate if it's true. So somewhere along the line, the former head of Paramount, the guy named David Kirkpatrick, who fired me off a screenplay, many years ago, reached out to me, said, I've read some of your posts, and I really think you should write a book about this, about, our cat. Our cat is playing the piano. And never does that unless I'm on a podcast. So she's agreeing. She's underlining what I'm saying. So David said, you really should write a book, but in chronological order of what people have said in his life, where he was when these things happened. So that's how this book came about, the greatest story never told. Sorry. Yeah. And the reason I call it that is because it's this unusual story that other people are saying. So I'm filming, and they're saying, he's saying this, or Mary is saying this. And, these people are saying these things. But I think it's important to underline the concept, which is he still is adamant about unconditional love. That was his message when he was on the planet, and it hasn't changed. And so when questions come up about, what should I do this or should I do that? If the answer is unconditional love, then the answer is clear. Mm-hmm. Don't judge others. If you're having a problem with some other human being, try to think long and hard about why you're with them, and try to not have conditional love. The cat is agreeing with me. Thank you, cat. Anyway. Yeah. So, that's where that came about. And now tell me about your experience talking to him, because you've had conversations with him.
Yeah, I've had several. And so I'm not religious by no means. I was, as a child, the parent, she would want us to go to Sunday school, and I didn't like it. I didn't like what they were saying. I knew it wasn't true. And you probably hear that from a lot of people, as their child, and trying to be ingrained into the belief system. So at some point, I was very rebellious about it. They would dress me up in, the dresses and, the little shiny shoes, and curlers in my hair, and I would brush them out, and I'm like, no. And I would make us late, and I would do everything that I could to keep from going. And so they were like, okay, well, let's not go anymore. I'm like, good, because I don't want to go.
Wow, you got out of it. Good for you.
Yeah. So lo and behold, I knew that everything they were saying just didn't fit, didn't feel right. Even with the Last Supper, oh, that's not Mary sitting by him. They had nothing to do with each other, and I'm like, that's a lie. I also even knew that that he had practiced Buddhism at some point. Now, as a child, I don't even know how I knew this, but whenever I heard this as an adult, I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's true. It's just this internal knowing. So,
well, if I can interject for a second. Mm-hmm. So I was with Robert Thurman. We were traveling around India, and we were in a place called Hemis, which is a monastery up in the Himalayas. Mm-hmm. It's very remote. and Robert Thurman, Uma's dad, he's a very famous Buddhist scholar, and so they would invite him and his group to come and visit, and then we'd do ceremonies and stuff like that. And I'm sitting next to him up in the courtyard of Hemis Monastery, and the abbot that was sitting next to me, and he leaned over to me and he said, "You know, Jesus studied here." And
Wow.
I looked at him and said, "Which Jesus?" Like I didn't know what he's talking about. And I wish I had, because here I was, I haven't been back. But that is the monastery where there was a guy named Nicholas Notovich, and he's very controversial. If you look him up, they'll say he was a fraud or blah blah blah. But he didn't write this book that is so famous in sort of the life of Issa, the life of Saint Issa, because Issa is the name they call Jesus in the Middle East. In the Quran, he's known as Isa, as a derivative of Isaiah. But anyway, and so this book was not written by Notovich; it was translated by his Sherpa, who spoke the language. And so the Sherpa wrote out all the pages. And so this book, which it's only like 30 or 40 pages, I reproduce it in my book. But it's this story of an alternate version of Jesus's life, but all the way up until the crucifixion. And so, but what's fascinating about it is the traveling to and from Jerusalem from the age of 15 to age of 30. It goes back and forth, and he meets all these different religious leaders. And what makes the book so fascinating is that some of the religious sects that they talk about no longer exist. So they did exist when whoever was writing this book. And so historically, you can find that they did exist. The white priests of Persia, for example, they're no longer a sect that people are aware of, but somebody, was writing that down. There's also some quite fascinating alternate things that are in there, but go ahead. I'm sorry. So I think you're accurate, because he literally studied Buddhism, and I think he also knew those esoteric yoga practices, the
Mm-hmm.
ones where you shift your consciousness away from your body when you're in pain. They're called the 6 yogas of Naropa. I'm
Mm-hmm.
familiar with them, but there are these yogic exercises where there's one called Tumo that's very famous, where monks sit out in the snow and they make snow melt around them, and their inner fire happens. But some of them are consciousness shifting, where you shift your consciousness outside your body and into an animal that has just passed away. And then there's these reports of birds flying and deer getting up and walking and that sort of thing. It's mind-bending stuff, but I think that was something he may have learned that helped him survive this ordeal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a lot of the stories that maybe what they do tell is more esoteric, with learning the Buddhism,
Yeah.
and the
And
methods of
so
yoga.
tell me, when did you have that experience of seeing him or hearing from him, or what happened? Was that in your near-death event, or was that in life?
It's actually in life. Coming back from having the near-death experience, I've had my abilities open, and my first experience was probably about a year and a half after the near-death experience. And at the time, I was starting to work in an addiction
Oh, good for
a
you.
place, yeah, with eating disorder, and then people who were alcoholics. So it was like 6 in the morning, and I was on my way to work, and I am pulling up to park my car, and out in front of me, if you will, in the parking lot where you park, like it's backlined by trees and bushes. And so my beams, like when I parked, it was like this vision of Jesus just walked in front of me, and the beams of my car was just focusing in on him. And it was like this energetic, it wasn't a person, it was this energetic field that was like glowing within the light when the lights were hitting on him. And the interesting thing about it was he was all dressed in white, and it was kind of like a robe, but it wasn't a robe. It was more like a yogic outfit.
Yeah.
And like it was a top and bottom, but it wasn't like a robe. But at the same time, and then his hair was changing. So it was how we depict him as Jesus with the long hair,
Yeah.
the white person, and the blue eyes and things like that. Um, it morphed from that image to somebody who had shorter hair and had a different complexion, and it wasn't that person. So it kept morphing back and forth. And I'm like, that's interesting. And so on the weekend, there was a metaphysical store down the road from where I'm at and in between where I was working and living. So I stopped in there regularly. And the one psychic that I talked to in there, and she's like, "Oh, you're having visions of Jesus." And I'm like, "How did you know?" Yeah. And so from there, I've had other experiences because I do Reiki. He comes into the healing sessions with us and he helps with the healing. When I was doing, he came into the offices when I was doing work with the clients for addictions. And so he's been a lot of, the healing practices and things like that. And then I had where I went to Arthur Findlay College and I was going
Oh,
in to
okay.
take, have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah, sure. In
Yeah.
England, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
I
was
want them
there.
to invite me. I want to go over there. I want to go do it. Were you taking classes there?
Yeah, I was taking 2 weeks of trance healing, and he was there, but he also was the one that told me to go there. Like, so when in my meditation, he came in, and after he just came in and went out, and I'm like, well, where's he going? He just comes in and he leaves because he was bringing in Arthur Findlay. So Arthur Findlay actually came in after Jesus
Oh,
and
interesting.
guided me to go. So he
Oh,
was
lovely.
introducing Arthur Findlay, basically.
Right, like an MC. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Arthur Finn.
Now Arthur Finley's here. So, and I was like, okay, well, that was interesting. Um, and yeah, he just shows up in different things like shamanic circles, healing, channeling, my Kundalini awakening. He was there giving me information to write because I do channeling writings. Yeah, so, and then when I stopped doing counseling, this was really profound because, a lot of people may not think, certain things about him. And so as far as the place that I was working at this time, it was like 2 years later. Like I really wasn't getting through to the clients because it was an opiate center. And basically they're in it for the money. And so they want to keep giving people medications and they're still using. They don't want to give them the right tools or
Wow.
the things like that. So it's really hard to get people to heal and walk away from that in those places. And so I gave up. I'm like, I'm here to help, not to make it worse. And I don't want to be part of this organization. So I left. And I was like, I'll just start doing coaching and counseling on my own outside of this. And so I was like talking to Jesus, and in a meditation, I was like, well, how did you like, because, him trying to get other people to see the light, do you know what I mean, with his messages and not really being a savior. I was like, well, how did you deal with a lot of that stuff, And like he just sent me, instead of like speaking it, he sent me the emotions of how frustrated he was.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, I felt his frustration and his emotions, and it brought me to tears. And I was like, oh my God. Because like I wasn't really helping anybody in those places. So I was like, I gotta go. I can't be here anymore. So
Yeah, and why not? And start your own version of that. I mean,
hmm
you've pinpointed the thing, and it's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but AA, which has a God component, to
hmm
the program, didn't have that initially. And the guy who had created Bill, I don't know his last name, but he was having a real hard time trying to help people with alcoholism, and because they were failing, the recidivism rate was high. And he wrote to Carl Jung, the famous
hmm
psychologist, and said, I'm really having a hard time. And there's a letter that Carl Jung wrote to him and said, in terms of the data about people suffering from issues like this, when somebody has a religious or a spiritual awakening, that apparently helps them. So that's why that's included
hmm.
into their rubric, the 12-step program. And it's just a fascinating point because And it's the same, I would say the same thing is true with near-death experiencers who meet the guy, let's say. They meet, him, and then they have this experience where they don't fear death anymore because they know everything's going to be okay. And it's one thing to tell people, everything's going to be okay, and, the journey that you're on. But the problem and I have friends who are psychologists and therapists from traditional materials scientists, versions of that. And we try to discuss these things because there are these two elements that medicine has dealt with. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They're, the sociological issues. Where'd you grow up? Did you grow up around drug use? Was it a difficult life? Did you have a problem? And the genetic component, which is, maybe your body is predisposed, not predetermined, predisposed to addictions. Just a little bit of sugar drives you crazy, that sort of thing. But there's this third element that people don't deal with and they sort of ignore, and it's the spiritual component. Spiritual meaning, how many lifetimes have you had where you've been dealing with this issue? And what I found is that, in the terms of karmic journey, the word karma in Sanskrit actually means action or energy. It doesn't really mean sin or baggage, like you're going to be punished for something you did, because in the research, people talk about being able to choose their lifetimes or to turn them down. And I film people, and I have these two films on Amazon. One's called Flip Side, the other one's called Hacking the Afterlife, where I'm filming people accessing their life planning session with their teachers and counsels and guides and saying, I want to revisit this action, this karmic action that I screwed up, that I thought I could, like an addiction, I thought I could overcome that. So I'm going to revisit that. And then you talk to people and they say, I thought that was a great plan, but when I got here, I forgot how much stronger the drugs are, because they might have been addicted to laudanum or some other drug back in a century ago or a couple of centuries ago, and now it's, whatever, Katie bar the door, they've got these opioids that they can't overcome. And my point is, the journey that we take is a lot more our choice, planning the play, planning the cast of characters, who's going to play the role of my parent. And when people hear that, many people go, I would never choose these people. But you can actually, either through hypnotherapy or through guided meditation, or sometimes with a really good medium who understands the rubric, you can visit that event when you're saying, who's going to volunteer? Is there anybody here who wants to play the role of my parent? Please. Or if people are right there and they're just, here we are again, let's do it again. I was your brother last time, and this time I'm going to be your dad. Or, you were my son before. And it's fascinating how many people can access that information. And it does throw people off because I was, like I say, the school of thought has always been, that consciousness is confined to the brain. We just have to deal with psychological issues of this brain, of this time and this era. And those are things that we have to solve. We have to fix. I hear the word paranormal, abnormal all the time from people telling me, well, you're talking about paranormal stuff. And I like to point out, there's one of my books is called Divine Counsels in the Afterlife. And I had 20 scientists, doctors, and clergy. So a Harvard neuroscientist, different neuroscientists, a bishop, do a guided meditation with me. And all of them, I thought a percentage wouldn't be able to do it, but all of them were able to talk to people off stage, access their teachers and guides and council members, and learn something new information. It can't be cryptomnesia, something you made up or read or saw. And you do that sort of thing, and they can, when they access that new information, it's something that you realize, wow, this is something that I plan to do. But 100% we're able to do it. So that makes it the norm. So it would be abnormal to suggest that anyone could not, or paranormal to say that no one. So you mentioned this earlier, which is I've done some research into filters on the brain. Dr. Bruce Grayson, at University of Virginia, he wrote the book After about near-death experiences, and he helped create the IANS group, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And he points out, I think it's page 125, because I cite it quite often, where people have filters on the brain that block this awareness for good reason, usually physiological reasons, or it's information not conducive to survival. So like if you saw all the dimensions around you, you wouldn't be able to get through your day. But when you do have a near-death experience, it's like showing the brain how you can bypass those filters that are in place. If you have an out-of-body experience or a vivid dream or take hallucinogens, or in my case, filming people or doing hypnotherapy, which is like the 4 to 6 hour session, 4 or 5 hours in, you're bypassed those filters that have blocked that. And for people, who are interested about filters, there's quite a few children, as we've heard, who don't have the filters. Kids until about the age of 8, kids who can see imaginary friends, people who aren't there, or in some cases recall previous lifetimes. There's a great book, Children's Past Lives by Carol Bowman, and also Jim Tucker's book, Before, University of Virginia. Historically accurate cases of people recalling previous lifetimes. And then conversely, as Dr. Grayson points out, in cases, and you may have seen this, terminal lucidity, people who are elderly and they're just about to cross over, and they start talking about people who are waiting for them, that are in the room. And it's because the filters have fallen away, because as Grayson puts it, the atrophied brain is dying and the filters have died along with it. And so now you're seeing people that are waiting for you. So when you cross over. So when you mentioned it, when you had your near-death experience, it's like your filters went down. Yeah. And now this information becomes a little, maybe it's not easy to process, but it becomes more in your face, whether it's Jesus showing himself. The question then becomes, is Jesus showing you himself because he wants you to follow not a religious path, but the unconditional love path? You see? And that's where people get confused when they see him in a near-death experience. They're like, what's this? Do I have to change my religion now?
Yeah,
Whatever.
because like in all my experiences, he never said that he was my savior. He didn't say, I'm going to save you. He's
And none of that, like, I died for your sins. Not one one word in that thing, which is what people like hold on to. They hold on to the fear-based aspect of their religion, but they can't really conceptualize. Here's a guy who's saying, love unconditionally. And what part of that isn't clear? No conditions. You cannot claim that, the guy holding a gun at me, I have to love him. Hello? Yes. Because you probably knew him in a previous lifetime. You probably invited him to come and do that. Excuse me while I just push this button here for a second. Thanks. Sorry. Anyway, so would you like to try to see if you can access any of this information yourself, my dear?
Sure. You do a guided meditation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and just so to give people context, so I was filming people for about, 5 or 6 years doing these hypnotherapy sessions, 4 to 6 hours. I could put the camera on a tripod and I would sit in the corner, take notes, and listen. And the hypnotherapist does about an hour of induction, where they relax people. And then hopefully, they're used to ideating or saying aloud what they're seeing. It's, the act of closing your eyes and saying, I'm seeing something and this is what I'm seeing, and not judging whatever comes through. And what I discovered is that people could access this information like right under the surface. I could just start asking people, friends of mine, questions. one friend said, yeah, I did a hypnotherapy in college. I was like, yeah, what happened? Oh, I saw a guy's face. I said, okay, who's the guy? I don't know. I'm like, well, can you see him now? And he went, yeah. In 15 minutes, he was crying because this was a guy in the 1500s in Italy who was torturing him to death, along with his friends were trying to assassinate him. And in my mind, I know this guy very well. I was like, what? But I realized, oh my gosh, this past life experience was so close that just within a few seconds, he was able to access so much information. So I eventually came to a technique, I learned guided meditation from Robert Thurman, who does like Tibetan versions of it, like breath meditation, you count your breath, but there's meditations, the jewel tree of Tibet, where you imagine a tree and a lake and you start to picture things and you start to imagine yourself, giving energy and love, that sort of thing. So this is more along those lines.
Okay.
So I don't know how long we have, but let's just see how far we go. So
Okay.
I want you to picture yourself in a boat on a river. Can you do that?
Okay, I'll try.
All right. So now first let's look at the boat. What does the boat look like?
It's wooden.
Wooden. And are there any oars or? Is it new wood or old wood?
It looks older wood, not new.
Okay. And is it more of a canoe or more of a flatboat?
And it looks like more of a canoe up against the shoreline with rocks.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you. Are we in a lake, a river, a pond, the ocean?
I would say it's like a lake, maybe, because there's mountains all around.
So does this place look familiar to you? Do you know where this is, Laura, on the planet?
No.
Okay. Does the boat look familiar? Is this your construct, your created boat, or is this a boat you feel like you've been in before?
I don't recognize it. Just kind of when I closed my eyes and thought of a boat, it popped in.
Perfect. So take a look at your feet. What are you wearing?
It looked like sandals.
Okay. And take a look at what outfit you have on.
Shorts and a tank top, or more of a t-shirt.
What color is the shirt?
Blue.
Blue. And how about the shorts?
They look like khakis.
Okay. And take a look at you. Are you the age you are now, or are you a different age, or anything different?
Younger, and I would say about 30s.
Okay. And this outfit seems familiar. Is that right? Something you own? Or is it new?
No.
Okay, I think that's interesting because that means you've created something new for this outfit as opposed to something that's in your closet. So even though it's you, you're a little bit younger, which is a different thing than you are now. So I just want to point that out. And so let's just make, so you said that you're near the shore.
Hmm.
So let's just pretend there's a dock. We're tied up to the dock. I don't want you worried about drifting downstream while we're having this conversation. Can you do that?
Yep.
Okay. And now I'd like to invite someone to sit across from you. Somebody who's aware of us having this conversation and wants to help us. And when I say that, who appears? Is it a male, a female, or a light?
A female.
And please describe her. Is she old or young, or what's she wearing?
Um, I'm getting Mary.
Don't
The
judge it.
first thing that came in, and a light gown.
Light colored gown. Okay.
Hmm.
White or blue or what color?
It's actually like a light purple.
Okay, light purple. Very good. And how old does she look to you right now? But what age is she at?
About the same age.
And so let me ask Mary a question directly and let her put the answer in your mind. Mary, can I ask you a question? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mary, are you familiar with me, Richard?
No.
No. Have we ever had a conversation before?
Yes.
We have. So then you are familiar with me. Are you teasing Laura?
She says I think so.
Okay, very good. I understand. I mean, I think I understand. So first question for you, Mary, are you projecting an image of Mary to for comfort, for Laura's comfort, or are you actually Mary, the person who had a child named Jesus? It's okay.
Mary with Jesus.
Mary with Jesus. Okay, very good. And so let me ask you, how is our friend Laura doing?
She's doing very well.
Do you represent her main guide or somebody who works with her? Are you just stopping by to say hi?
I'm here to help her.
Okay, very good. And are you also here to introduce your son?
Jesus?
Yeah. I know you had more than one son, but maybe
Yes.
you didn't. I don't know. Did you have more than one son? Or
No, I had a girl.
oh, you had a girl. Okay. And what was her name, by the way?
Sarah.
And by the way, so when you married Joseph, you know who I'm talking about. Joseph, your husband. Did he lose his wife? What happened? Why was he available? Because he had children already. Is that right? He already had a family. Did he lose his wife?
No.
So did he already have children?
Yes.
Okay. And where'd they come from?
Jerusalem.
No, but I
It
mean,
was coming to me.
okay, but I listen. I understand. I'm kind of leading you in these conversations, but of course, if Joseph had children, they came from a woman that he was likely married to. Is that correct, Mary? You can just put it in her mind. It's fine. The answer is yes. Of course, she had to.
Yes.
That's where, because the people say that Jesus had brothers and sisters. So, Mary, I appreciate you stopping by. Is there anything you want to show to Laura, or can we invite you to move over a little bit and let's invite Jesus to come and stop and talk to us for a second, if you don't mind? And when I say that, what's he look like?
Um, it almost looks like they're sharing space. Like it's hard to see.
Okay. So here's what I want you to do. There was that vision that you had of Jesus, like in front of your car. And imagine, like, take a photograph of that, almost like a photographic memory, just a flash photo. And let's invite that frequency and energy to come into the boat, if you don't mind. And when I say that, how does he appear? Young, old? What's he wearing?
He's wearing white.
He's wearing white, like a white
Hmm.
tunic or a white robe or white pants and a shirt?
More like what I explained before.
Okay. And so let me ask you, Jesus, you probably know what I'm going to ask you, but would you mind changing into something a little more conducive to conversation? And when I say that, what's he wearing now?
Purple flannel shirt.
Oh, cool. And pants?
Yeah, pants.
Regular pants? Sorry? Khaki or
They're looking like slacks.
slacks? Jeans?
Mm, it's hard to tell. No, they're not jeans. They're more like, I don't know what they're made of,
Slacks.
but they're
Black?
slacks. Yeah.
What color? I just want to see how stylish he is today. Purple shirt's pretty stylish. Does it
Mm-hmm.
say anything on the
They're
shirt, by the way? Is there any logo or something?
no,
No. Okay, that's fine. How about his shoes? What's he wearing?
they're black.
Okay, very good. So, Jesus, if you don't mind, I know you're busy. Before you tell me you're busy, are you familiar with me, Richard?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your opinion of the book that I wrote about you? Thumbs up, thumbs down, wave of the hand.
It gives the image that portrays him more than what religion does.
Okay. So that I'll take it. I'll take that as a thumbs up. Is that right, sir?
He said it's not perfect, but it's good.
It's not perfect. Well, thank God for that. God forbid. All right, so let me ask you, so you've had a number of conversations with our friend Laura. How is she doing in her work? What does she need to focus on? What is it, something, is it more of this, what she's doing?
she's she's doing good. She needs to stay focused more on the path and what she's creating.
Needs to stay more focused on it. And how can she do that? What's a way for her to be more focused?
Just basically spending more time doing it.
Okay, very good. And let me ask you this. Um, I know you're not interested in politics or stuff like that, but what is it you want to tell people tuning in that in terms of their journey, there's the people walking around the planet in stress and in pain. What is something you'd like to tell them about their journey or any way that we can help them?
Something's going on with my chest. um,
You mean,
Suffering is
is it a
more.
feeling in your chest? Did you say?
It's like a
What's
heaviness.
okay?
And
Well, what? Just tell us what's the purpose of that? Why are you showing her that heaviness? Are you showing her what the planet is feeling?
yes,
And so, how can we eliminate that? How do we alleviate or make that heaviness dissipate?
to be free is to let go of attachment.
So, to let go of that feeling. Is that right? But is there a way that you can project an image or a thought into Laura that she can feel like a wave of perhaps, I don't know, love or an energetic blast of love? Would that help alleviate that kind of heaviness?
It's the outside world. She feels it more and a deeper level within herself, but it's the outside world that feels the conditions that are being put on everybody.
Okay.
It's
And
not
so,
more so about Laura. She's just feeling the vibration that I'm sending.
okay, very good. And so, I guess what I'm asking is, in terms of a healing exercise, when you say you need to let go of that, you need to let go of those attachments. I mean, of course, you're not letting go of attachments to love. You're letting go of attachments to anything that's negative. Is that right?
Attachment to things that are going on in the world, the worry, the stress, the fear, the dogma.
Okay. And can you replace it with a feeling of love? That's my question. Compassion, empathy.
We can channel love.
All
We
right.
can make it what we want to. We can create what we want.
Let me ask you this, because I have you. It's not often we get to have a chat like this. What or who is God?
Source.
Source. And so I've quoted you in the past as saying that you brought more of source with you, and that's why people feel that unconditional love. So is source composed of unconditional love?
Creator's love.
Creator's love. Now let me ask you this, and let's just be clear. Before we incarnate, before we come to the planet, we plan the journey. Is that correct, with our guides and teachers?
Yes.
So if we are creating the journey, that makes us creators. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that we're as responsible for the journey as is the folks who are asking us to be here and do things. What's the primary goal of a person to be on the planet? Is it to learn things to better themselves, or is it to help or heal other people? Does it depend?
To find themselves.
Refine themselves.
To find
Oh,
themselves.
to find themselves. All right, I like that. To find themselves. And let me just ask you, is there a graduation element to this journey that people are on, where after they find themselves at some point, do we graduate to become guides, or graduate to become teachers, or graduate to become spiritual leaders? Something like that?
We move into other realms.
Move into other realms. Okay. And in the terms of moving into the other realms, is our goal to help other people, help other beings?
We create other realities.
Okay. But as we create the other realities, I'm getting back to what your mission is, Jesus. You're somebody who's continually teaching people about unconditional love. Is that correct?
To teach love.
Teach love. And so therefore, once we leave the planet and we move into these other realms, we're doing the same, teaching love. Is that right?
They're experiencing and finding love in different levels of awareness.
Okay. I'm like a professor trying to get a student to answer the question the way that I phrase the question. But that's very good. I appreciate that, Jesus. So when we interrupted you today, what were you doing? Where were you? Were you all over the place, a million different things, or specifically were you doing something else?
Having fun.
Having fun. Doing what, bro? Share the fun. What kind of fun does Jesus have?
Having fun sharing information, helping people.
Okay. Can I say I'm not sure that channel would be very popular in terms of fun, but well, give us one example, please, or just give Laura an example of somebody that you were helping, not today or whatever, just an example of somebody or an event that you created or did for somebody. And it doesn't have to be, it could be somebody she knows, but it could be somebody she doesn't know. If you don't mind, just pop something into her mind of something that you have done to help somebody.
I don't see anything. I'm not getting anything.
All right, well, he doesn't have to show, he doesn't have to follow my rubric here, which is fine. Are you not showing it to her because it's not something she needs to see right now, or do you want her to focus on something else?
Share what I'm getting is I'm sharing knowledge through and wisdom through love, for love.
Through love, for
And
love.
it helps them to see what they're doing in that space. So there's no real scenario that I'm sharing.
Okay, okay. And specifically, I mean, of course, I would imagine that well, let me ask you this. In terms of human experience, we have so many different avatars: Krishna, Buddha, other people. Do they share the same frequency you do?
We have different frequencies.
But you're also all about compassion and love, correct? So the
Yes.
frequencies are related to that aspect.
Yes, we let them feel us through different frequencies, but it's all love.
It's all love.
Everything's out of love.
All right, thank you. Because sometimes I've had people. So, in her image of you, when she first saw that image, when Laura first saw your image, you showed her various different guises. Were you showing her something, a more accurate image of who you look like to people around you in that era, or different eras, different times?
She knows me more with shorter hair, and so it was to help her recognize me.
Well, let me ask you this. Did Laura have a lifetime when you were on the planet?
A few.
But did she know you when you were on the planet?
He's saying certainly.
Certainly. Okay, let's not judge it. So do me a favor, Jesus, if you don't mind. I always like saying that sentence. Would you show her who she was when you were on the planet? Was she a man or a woman?
She was a little boy that died early in
Little
life.
boy that died early. And so did the little boy pass away before you left Jerusalem, or while you were in Jerusalem? It's just the same era or the same time, or did he ever see you, or any connection?
No, she didn't have any close connection. She was one of the ones that were like she was a child and one of the people that were in I'm given shown like there was like a crowd and there was
Okay, so
a
was it
child
like a
standing
crowd where
there.
you were speaking in public and she was one of the little kids in the crowd?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Now, Jesus, without going into too much detail, unless you want to, this book that I've written, which is people talking to you, you do say some unusual things that like the Bible is metaphor and all religions point to the same garden, but you also tell an alternate story about surviving the crucifixion. Let me just ask you, is that accurate?
Not getting anything on that.
Or no answer. I guess that's your prerogative. All right. Well, it could also be, and Jesus, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're concerned that people tuning in, this might be too much information for them. Is that correct?
It could be.
Okay, it could be. He's giving vague answers. I love that. It's very, it's very good. Sometimes he does. It's unusual because he's aware. Let's correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus. You're aware of the fact that she has an audience who's watching this, correct? As opposed to just one on one. If just Laura and I were having this conversation, just me and her, your answers might be a little more in depth. Is that correct?
It's possible they would not be open to what is being said.
What is being said? Okay, all right. And let's just allow this. What you said earlier on when we started the podcast, you said the book was mostly accurate.
Correct.
Okay, let's just leave it at that. And that allows for people to look at it and say, well, maybe that part's not accurate. So that's fine. That's exactly the journey. So let me ask you, give us a one, two, three, please. How does somebody reach out to you? What's the best way and best method to have a conversation with you directly? What would-
Meditate.
meditate. And when you say that, is it just like getting in a yoga pose in a specific room, or go out in the garden or the house, or what's the best way to do that?
Focus on meditation.
Focus. Okay. What
And
else?
just clearing the space, clearing your mind.
Okay. Focus, clearing your mind.
And just allowing.
I'm sorry?
And just to
And
allow.
just allowing. Okay. And then let me ask you, would somebody call your name? Would that help?
They can set an intention.
Okay, great. So actually saying your name aloud. And let me ask you a kind of a goofy question. This is like a nomenclature thing. I know it doesn't matter. Somebody calls you Jesus, you know your name. But what do your friends call you? I've heard people call you Isaiah or Essie. I've heard people call you Yeshua. You know, they're afraid, I guess, of offending you. So what do your pals call you? What does your mom call you? A son, I guess. But what do your friends call you?
Isha.
Esha. Okay. And I'm sorry, is Laura familiar with that term, or are you telling her this new information?
It's what I got when that's what
Okay.
you shared. Yeah.
Very good. Essa, you mean like ESSA?
Isha. ISHA.
ISHA. All right, very good. Now, let me ask you this. Is that a derivative of Isaiah?
It's short.
Okay, that's what I mean. Short for Isaiah. Love that he corrects me. It's short. I know it's short. S-E. E-S-I. Dude, I get it. All right, love it. Eshi. Isha. Very good. I think it's fascinating that, Westerners just suddenly came up with this other name, Jesus, but you still know what they're talking about. Does that annoy you in any way? It's like, being called,
And I don't know where that came from.
that's funny. It's like being called Luigi, and your name is actually Louis. I don't know. It is interesting because people live and die by this information about you. It's crazy. But Isha, I think that's a lovely and a fun name. So far we've got focus, clear the energy, find a place to meditate. Could be inside, could be outside, could be at a beach, could be in a forest, could be someplace peaceful, loving, whatever. Could be in a pub, it doesn't matter. Say his name. You can call him Jesus, he knows who's calling. Isha, if you really want to be more specific. And then what should they do? Should they ask you questions about helping them, or should they ask you questions about your journey?
They can ask questions about anything.
Okay. And so how do they differentiate between their imagination, wishful thinking, hoping that they're going to hear something, and you actually giving them information? Is there a way to differentiate?
The feeling.
A feeling. So if the information comes with a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, if the information, so you ask a question and you get an answer, but it includes a feeling, then that's more accurate. Is that correct?
It's like a knowing. It's
Like a knowing. That's good.
yeah.
And I've heard this before, which is when you get an answer before you even ask the question, then you'll know you've made a connection.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Okay, very good. And because I've had people say, I was going to ask my mother, my father, my grandfather this question, but before I could even get to the question, the answer was popped into my head. One last question about this, sir. Are we speaking telepathically? Because I can't hear your answers, but Laura can. So is this sub form? Because in dreams, lips don't move. People communicate telepathically in dreams. So it's almost like we're in a dream state. But is it something like that? Are we in that arena?
Yes, it's telepathic.
Okay. And what's a way that humans can help increase their ability to have telepathic communication?
And meditate.
Meditating. Okay. Any specific meditation you can recommend to people? And I'll throw some out at you. The vase meditation, the breath meditation, the jewel tree of Tibet meditation, Tonglen. Any of those ring a bell or something you want to?
Tibetan.
Tibetan? Okay, thank you. And is that because Tibetans have just been honing that practice for centuries? Or do they have a,
Yes.
yes, okay, I was going to say, or do they have a special through line, a special operator? And Tibetans have been, meditating, as Tibetan Buddhists have been meditating, well, the Bon as well, for eons, centuries. And those Tibetan meditations, and some of them I just named, Tonglen is very useful to help people with depression. If you look it up, Tonglen, because it can cure or alleviate symptoms of depression. And that's a Tibetan meditation that Richard Davidson used at the University of Wisconsin. Jesus, are you familiar with him?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Richie. Jesus, what do you want to tell Laura's audience? They didn't expect to be hearing from Jesus today, but what do you want to tell them?
You have nothing to worry about. Everything is taken care of.
All right, can I tease you about that for a little bit? Mainly because when humans hear that, they don't feel like that's the answer. When you say everything's going to be okay, they don't really believe when they hear that, because how could everything be okay? But you are saying, in essence, correct me if I'm wrong, everything is going to be okay. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that applies to everything that's on your plate and everything that you're suffering from and every political thing that you're freaking out about, or every war that's happening, or everything that's happening on the planet. Everything is going to be okay. And why is it going to be okay? Because it's already set in stone, or because ultimately when you get off stage, you realize that it was all part of a play?
Correct.
Okay. I love when he just goes, yeah, that's it. You got it. Very good. All right, Jesus, I appreciate you stopping by to chat with us. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to hear from you. Anything else you want to tell Laura or tell her audience?
To have fun and enjoy the journey.
Wow. To have fun and to enjoy the journey. Jesus, have you ever heard this term? The journey is the destination.
Mm,
No?
no, I'm not
Okay.
getting anything on that.
Doesn't sound familiar. And then there's another saying that I'm fond of. It was from Rumi, the great poet, Persian poet, that we are not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in every drop. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. All right. High fives all around. And Jesus, what are the lottery numbers for this Friday? You never give them to me. What is that?
I got a 5 and a 2.
A 5 and a 2. All right. Very
I don't
good.
know which one that's for, but
That's what's so funny is I asked him that once and he gave me like numbers and I went and played them and I won $1.
oh, there you
Which
go.
was the amount of the ticket. And then I heard a voice in my head say, "Not very specific, were you?" So 5 and a 2. That's the lottery winning numbers somewhere on the planet. Is that right, Jesus? Can we get a high five on that one?
Yes.
All right, my friend. It was very nice to talk to you. All right, let's go back to our boat. Thank you so much, Jesus. of course, you're always welcome to talk to us or to Laura or to anybody tuning in. Just, you heard what he said. Find him a place to meditate, say his name, and ask your questions. And if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus, you cannot change a person's path or journey that they've chosen to live. It might be an illness, it might be something, but if you can help them, you will. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So
It's
in other
free
words,
will.
it's free will, and he's not going to intercede because it might upset, if somebody signed up for a lifetime to experience these things, because in a future lifetime they're going to be a surgeon, so they wanted to know what it was like to have that illness. He wouldn't disrupt that. Correct? All right. Very good. I think we
don't interfere with anything that's going to keep them from having the experience they signed up for.
Very good. All right. And so does Laura have any questions for you that I haven't asked? She doesn't have to say them aloud. She can just think them.
No.
No. Nothing? It's allowed. It's very good. Well, listen, the paradigm changes when you realize you can talk to people off stage, including Jesus. All right, so let's go back to our boat, our lovely little boat on our river, and let's go where the boat is next to the dock. And let's thank everyone who assisted and helped us in this conversation. Mary, we appreciate that. We appreciate you stopping by and being the MC that introduced your son to the conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. And that's it. We went through, I think we went 30 minutes. And how are you feeling there, Laura?
My neck's a little stuff. It was like, it did feel like heavy weight, like a lot of like heavy weight. I don't know.
Heaviness now. It's interesting because
Not a bad way, but just like really grounded.
Oh, okay. It's interesting.
Yeah,
It's like a
like,
vibe change.
yeah.
Well, that's fast. So that's what I do. And I mean, I am a little bit of a person who I'm a lead, I'll lead people. And I think that's allowed because I've been doing this for so long. I know already, having done this for so many years, that these people exist on the other side. And it's just a matter of finding a way to ask them questions that I can't hear the answer. I don't hear Jesus's voice, but I know because I've based on all the other conversations people have had, what his parameters are and why he's here and how he can help and, and how he's entertaining. He's not walking around talking about, the suffering of the innocents or something. It's mind bending. And how people get put on a stake and burned. The heretics.
Yeah. 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 And when you were saying like the words that when you were talking and asking the questions, the words are already coming in.
Already getting the answer.
Yeah.
So isn't that fascinating? Because that initially came from, I was doing a session with Jennifer Schaefer. We were in a restaurant. And she said, "Oh, Michael Newton." No, she said, "Oh, Morton is here." And I went, "Morton? I don't know anyone named Morton." And then she said, "The guy who made the documentary about." I said, "Oh, you mean Michael Newton?" Because if she was making it up, you'd think she'd remember his name.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't remember his name. And then I was going on Coast to Coast that evening, the radio show. And I said, "So, Michael, what's a nice methodology I can tell people to talk to people, that are off stage?" And he said, "Say their name, ask them questions." Just that. And I said, "But wait a second. How do you know if the answers are correct or you're making them up?" And he said, "When you get an answer before you ask the question, you'll know you've made a connection." So I was asking questions, and while I'm speaking, you're getting the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of that. You see?
Yeah.
So it shows that you're connected.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, not only because here's a guy who lived 2,000 years ago. I'm a fan of history. I know that civilization has been around for, they estimate, about 150,000 years. People living, in cities and villages and farming. And so there have been a lot of avatars that have come and gone over those
Hmm.
150. It's not like people just weren't thinking until 2,000 years ago. And so it's wonderful and lovely to have a person who we all can identify who we're talking about,
Right.
and ask him questions about the journey and what's the process. It's like having a best friend off stage and it happens in life. We have people that we've grown up with, your parents, whatever, your relatives, and they pass away. They're not gone. It's literally having a best friend over somewhere where they are aware of what's happening that we don't get.
Hmm.
So, like, why wouldn't you talk to them? Why wouldn't you ask them questions like, "How are you doing?" And again, they won't answer if it's going to disrupt your path.
Right.
Just like he was
Exactly.
saying, I'd ask him a question and he'd like no answer.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, he was kind of and I felt he was very serious today. Like very, but jokingly serious. I don't know, it was a weird, interesting energy. So,
I think that's well, and I can't presuppose that he's going to behave towards me any different than anybody else. And of course, I can't see him. I don't hear him. I just know that I can ask him questions, and there's no question I can ask that he would be offended by,
hmm.
or that he won't, or that thing of non-answering, which is you've asked a question that this isn't appropriate to answer in this venue or this
Right.
forum, or you've asked a question that is beyond your capacity to understand. And so in my answering, it's not going to help you. And so they don't answer. They don't say anything.
Yeah.
But then I can also ask them, the reason you're not answering that, is that because this is beyond my capacity to understand? And sometimes I get, I just saw a thumbs up. That's it.
Mm.
So I don't think we should ever fear questions. You can
No.
ask questions. It's only when you start believing something that you wish was going to happen. They won't tell you, people generally won't tell you things that are upsetting because you heard it. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But people want to hear, like, am I going to have a car accident in the next 4 hours or not? Or, am I going to go down this, am I going to have this when I go to the doctor's office or when I go to court? They want to know
Hmm.
what's going to happen. And if you know everything's going to be okay, then it doesn't matter what the day is because everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And people don't want to hear that, but at the end of the day, it is.
No.
Whether it's everything works out. And from my understanding, my channeling and my experience, everything's choreographed. We've set things up. It's a play. We've signed up for things. We go on the other side. We look at our lives, what we did, and we reconstruct. So if we didn't do something or we didn't, accomplish something, then we have other opportunities. So you
Yeah,
can say that
absolutely.
everything's going to be
Absolutely.
okay.
No, and it's, I hear it often and
Hmm.
I try to underline it because it sounds like, yeah, everything's going to be okay. Like, hey, yeah, don't worry about it. But it's such a profound answer and it's simple, but at the same time, it's quite deep, which is,
Yeah.
you mean everything? And literally, you're talking about everything. People spend a lot of time worrying about the planet, worrying about, their relatives, worrying about life and death. They're worried. And
Hmm.
that's part of the fear, that's part of the magic of coming to the planet Earth, because we experience those things, that yin yang. That's why we're here. And we agree to come because we get to have all that service and angst and nonsense and drama, and drama, conflict's the essence of drama. Can't have drama without conflict. And then we get off stage and we look back and we go, oh my gosh, I wasted a lot of time worrying about stuff because everything's going to be okay. But then, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, because then your friends come to you and go, you ready? You ready to go back? Get in the field? It's third down and the team needs us out there. And you're like, eh. And this is what I film people in the film Flip Side. I have 3 movies on Amazon.com. Flip Side, Talking to Bill Paxton, and Hacking the Afterlife. And people talk about their life planning session and literally say, you know what? You guys go ahead. I do not want to do that again. You played my drunk uncle in the Viking era, and you were really nasty, and I just don't want to go through that. And they come and say, no, but you're so good at doing, playing this role. We need you to be on the field with us. And you may, they may even remind you, I played the role of the person you asked me to play. So how hard can this be for you to realize it's your turn?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah. Well, and I think for like near-death experience, at least in my case, I can't think, speak for everybody else, but coming back in and realizing it is a play, it's hard to play in the play, knowing that it's not real. It's not like, it's real, but it's only real to the mind, the concept, the beliefs. And
I like to put it this way. It's like running into the theater, turning all the lights on in the theater and yelling, "It's a play." And everybody on stage is like, who the hell? Who turned the lights on? And the audience is looking around like, who's doing that? And so that kind of ruins the moment. If you're Meryl Streep and you're on stage and you're really invested in your role and you're emoting and playing the role, and if you're thinking about the fact that somebody's the critic is in row 3, you're having a hard time, enjoying yourself in the play. You have to be fully invested if you're a good actor. Mm-hmm. But, there are people, we know them, we've met them, we've experienced them, we've seen them who are kind of like, I'm not really that invested in this part. This is something interesting, because what people say is that we only bring a percentage of who we are, like somewhere between 20 and 40% roughly. And so I've, interviewed people, I'm talking to their higher selves, and I'm saying, so how much of yourself did you bring? 25%. Okay. Is the rest of you doing something else? Yeah, I'm actually incarnated on another planet right now. And there they live 300 Earth years. How much of your conscious energy is there? 15%. So there's so much of an adventure to be had. It's not just this play, but some people are aware of other plays happening simultaneously, like playing 3D chess with 5 different opponents.
Exactly. I had an alternate life experience throughout my journey here, and in this lifetime, I had my second child is a boy, and my first one's a boy, so I wanted a girl. And when I found out it was a girl, like something within me was like so upset it wasn't a girl. And I was like, I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, what's the big deal, But that was like with this inside myself that was upset with it. But 2 years ago, I realized that I have an alternate life where I have an actual girl in that lifetime. So then
interesting.
I was like, oh my God, that's why. Now that makes sense, right? I don't have it in this life, but I have an alternate life going on with a daughter in that life.
That's
and
fascinating.
They're playing out a different scene.
I was having this discussion with a parent whose child is going through that gender transition in their teens. And she didn't have any, she was trying to have a handle on it, just to be a compassionate parent. And I said, well, listen, I can tell you based on the research and based on talking to people about this stuff, it's possible that your child had many lifetimes as a man. And then this time, for whatever reason, there was a genetic switch or something happened along the way that just the timing just didn't work just right. And so now they're they come in a body of a woman and then they decide they want to switch and change because that's the lifetimes they're remembering. And you hear it often. I just feel like I'm not in the right body.
Mm-hmm.
And literally they're accessing this information. And so if only they could do a hypnotherapy session, they could see those other lifetimes and see the choice and see that their agreement was, I can handle anything. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure I was gonna. It's not a problem. I'll, be able to. Then they get here and it's like, well, this is much more than I thought I was going to be. So, and just short of surgery is what people, get crazy about. I think if you could use this kind of hypnotherapy or guided meditation to access the path, the journey, then you really let go of some of that stress that we put on. Who am I? What am I? What do I look like? What's my pronoun? I mean, not to knock that, but at the same time, what was your pronoun the last lifetime? And what was it but like for 15 other lifetimes? And if you can go back to that and then tell me why it is that you chose this lifetime so that you could have that kind of conversation, what are you here to teach or learn? Who are you here to heal or help? And like yourself, you've been helping with people in this kind of care of addiction and stuff like that. It's like, and I've seen it often where people who've sort of opened up the veil a little bit, they find themselves in these service-oriented occupations, hospice care, animal shelter care, all kinds of healing and modalities and helping people. It's almost like they share that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Just an unusual way to access this information.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, I don't know, it was just something that took me into, because when I came back from the near-death experience, there was a reminder, like they told me I wasn't going to remember everything. And I was only going to be able to bring back certain things. And then it would evolve from there. It would open up after coming back and integrating. And channeling. But at the same time, I was like, okay, when I came back in, it was the message that I was left with is to remind me to go into the field of counseling. And then that was my direction. But yeah, a lot of people who do come back, they go into helping fields.
That's really cool. I would say there's also this other element that just popped into my head, which is I've had people have conversations with people who are off stage and they talk about what it's like. So for example, there was this famous broadcaster named Art Bell. The show was Coast to Coast and he was on that for many years. And his producer called me up once and said, Art wants you on a show. And I was like, oh, great, sure, okay, when? And then at the last minute, she said, oh, he wants me to do the show. And so I did a show with Heather Wade. And during the course of the show, we did this guided meditation on the air. And it was sort of like an hour-long journey. It was mind-bending. And then 2 years later, Art Bell had passed away. And she called me up and said, I'd like to do a show with you again. I thought, oh, great. And so this time we talked to Art, who had crossed over. And she knew him, of course, very well. And so I'm asking him, so what's it like over there? What are you doing? How do you occupy your time? And he described creating a radio station. But analog, he said, you have to know where all the plugs go to make the thing work. And he said, all the discs that I'm spinning are songs that I remember from my youth. And I said, oh, so who's your audience? Who's listening? Who's tuning in to the Art Bell show on the other side? He said, well, it's not like that. You're just creating that and anybody can tune in if they want to. And I said, do you see any of your friends over there? He said, yeah, I go over to my friend Whitley Strieber's house. Whitley's alive. He's on the planet. He said, he'd go over to Whitley's house and they play cards together. And I said, you mean like his higher self is playing cards with you? He said, yeah. I said, does he remember that in the morning when he wakes up? He said, no. But, while he's sleeping, he and I hang out and we have conversations. So I met Whitley Strieber, finally, at Contact in the Desert last summer, backstage. And I said to him, hey, this weird conversation I had with Art Bell, and it was like this. I said, does that sound familiar to you? He said, I never played cards with Art Bell, but you saying it now makes me feel like it's absolutely true. So he was not aware of it, but his higher self is.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
your higher self, may have all kinds of things you're supposed to be doing. And you wonder, like, why isn't this connection like stronger? So we know, let me know
Yeah.
the lottery numbers. I have to look up
Yeah.
5 and 2. What lottery has a 5 and a 2?
Yeah, like two numbers. I don't know, but I
I think
was
all
like
of them
five
are three.
too. I was
Well,
like, where's the rest of the numbers?
that's his sense of humor, I guess. I don't know.
I give you two numbers. But
That's
yeah,
great.
like we have a lot of even maybe the fact that, we have a lot of lives that interfere with the life that we're currently living. If we haven't resolved them in the past life, I've had that experience and know people who've talked about that as well. For me is since childhood I've had a fear of spiders and I don't like my blood being drawn. And that I followed and traced that back to a life where I was a bug and a spider was eating me. So I carry that into this lifetime to work on that.
That's
You get over.
interesting. Well, I would, that's the kind of thing that I would explore with you because I'm just saying, in terms of the data, in terms of the research, I've talked to quite a few people, off stage to ask about, what's the architecture. And we also talked to animals quite a bit. And it was Jennifer Schaefer and I were doing a podcast with my boss, Robert Town, the guy who wrote Chinatown.
Mhm.
And when I worked for him for 3 years, mostly I walked his dog. And so at some point we were doing this live session with Robert, who was kind of skeptical about the whole process. We were trying to talk to a mutual friend who had passed away. But then I jokingly said, well, why don't we talk to Hira, which was his dog? And Jennifer immediately said, oh, I'm seeing a white shag rug, which was the way Hira looked. He was a Hungarian sheepdog, with the big curls and the long threads, cords of hair. And so I started asking him questions, just the way I would any human. And he launched into a whole story about his life and previous lifetimes and how he had been with Robert in a previous lifetime as a horse. And he named the house in Scotland, and I was able to find it near like a lake that he named. But Robert was skeptical until I asked him to show Robert something that only Robert would know. And Jennifer said to him, he's showing me him challenging a buffalo.
Huh.
And that happened on the island of Catalina where there's a buffalo herd. And Robert had taken his dog over there. And in that moment, I could see him shift because clearly the only person who knew that event was the dog. And since then, Hira has shown up quite a bit on our podcast, Hacking the Afterlife, especially when there's an animal story in the news. He'll talk about it. And I ask him the same question. So it's interesting because I've heard this from more than one animal, which is humans don't understand how incarnation works, but animals do. And that they choose lifetimes of purpose, and they can come back to us in a particular lifetime because, they only live 10, 15, 20 years, but they also recognize us as a frequency. It's like they find us. So and I've heard it many times, like we have this illusion, like we go down to the pound and find them.
Mm-hmm.
No, their higher self is telling us, you need to get in the car, go down to the pound. I'm there. I'm waiting for you. And we get down there, and many people report that feeling of like, oh, I just knew, I felt. And they're reporting that I knew you in a previous lifetime. I was your horse. I was a dog. I was a bird. I was a fish, whatever that journey is. It's extremely rare in the research for a person to be an animal and to remember that. In 15 years, I've only found one case where a person remembered being a fox in a previous lifetime. And even then, because then the question was, well, what about the life before that life? And that was another fox, but a different continent. So it's almost like, because we have this thing of the hierarchy, like animals moving up to humans. That's not the case. It's animals, everybody's equal on the other side. And we all choose our lifetimes, but animals understand purpose. like my purpose here is to do this for this amount of time. And humans don't really understand that because we get here and the filters kick in and we're not aware of why we're here. And either we learn stuff or we don't, or we have an experience like you have, which allows us an insight into the university and how everything's working. But I've never met anybody. There's also this thing, I talked about it, the 6 yogas in Naropa. There was this esoteric consciousness thing where you can shift your consciousness into another animal, like a bird or a fish or an insect. You can shift your consciousness into that thing, but you don't live that life like a beginning, middle, and an end, if you know what I mean, because you'd have to know their parents. And this is kind of the rubric, which is let's say a dog is going to come and be born, but it's got to know its parents, who the parents are, their siblings. So they are born and maybe they aren't with their family, and we then adopt them and we live our life with them. And then they go home, and what they report is they reconnect with their parents and their siblings. And they're romping around and creating other worlds and running in the grass. And then we show up, and a lot of times animals will show up and be our, what they call it is like a soft landing. They let us know that they're there, and that even if we don't believe in the afterlife, or we think something terrible is going to happen, there's an animal that we know, and we're able to focus on them and then not have that fear-based adventure. So I'm just saying it's really extremely rare for somebody, and I just wonder because that would be something we'd explore during your guided meditation, is like, what was the purpose of that memory? What did you access? Was it that? It's possible. But it also might not have been on this planet. 35% of the Michael Newton reports are from planets not here, other planets.
Everything was huge, like literally. And I don't know if it was because I was like a bug, right? But everything was like huge. It was monstrous. So was it dinosaur era? Was it if that was
maybe
true,
another planet?
Planets, yeah.
So something that looks like a spider, or in your mind translates as spider, who just happens to be walking like that instead of like that. I don't know.
I was in a spider web, and literally, like I could feel the vibration of it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it was real. Like I went into this realm where I was like experiencing it.
Let me ask you, what made you think that you were a bug? Could you see your mandibles, or was it just a feeling of being attacked by a spider that was big?
It was like I was all wrapped up, cocooned in a spider web, like it wrapped me. And then it was like I had this consciousness of being in that body.
That space. But I'm saying, did you have any awareness of insect fingers or insect arms or insect mandibles?
No, because I was wrapped up. That's the only thing I seen when I was wrapped up, and then I could feel the vibration of the spider coming, and then I could feel it and sense it over top of me.
And by the way, did you happen to catch that spider web story the other day where they found a spider web that's like a mile long, that's been created over 20,000 years, and you could clearly see if somebody. So it's I'm chuckling because when I was in Mexico, I went to this wedding. And I had this goofy experience where I was going for a jog up in the mountains, and I snapped a tendon. And so I couldn't walk, and my leg was swollen, and I was in the middle of nowhere. But there was a river, and so I went down in the river, and the ice cold water helped me, and it allowed me to walk. So I was walking back, took me hours. But at some point, I got my head down, and I'm walking, I'm trudging. And something said, look up. And I looked up, and like 6 inches in front of me were like 2 trees, standing next to each other, and inside was a giant spider web, but it was so thick that it was rope. The web was literally ropes of web, and if I'd gone like another second, I would have been stuck in that web. But what my brain said was, whatever created this web has to be a giant. And then I like, looked around. But of course, because of the huge spider web they discovered the other, day, which like was a mile long, there were just, billions of little tiny spiders doing that thing. So it's very possible that you were in a spider web as a human. It's possible, got stuck, in a spider web and you were like wiggling around, and that was a pretty scary thing to be wiggling around.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know, but in this lifetime, and I was like, so I was like, okay, I need to like deal with this because like every time I was like, no, am I going to kill it or am I just going to set it free? And my guides were like, well, have you ever just thought about forgiveness? And I'm like,
nice.
okay. So, and I'm like, once I did that, things shifted. And I think, a lot of times our past lives will bleed into this life if it's unfinished or whatever we need to work on. And when we do that, we can kind of put that chapter away, into the records and move on to other things. But
Sure,
yeah,
even the Dalai Lama says there's mosquitoes that just he tries to practice loving kindness
yeah,
until the mosquito shows lands on him. Do I let
yeah,
him drink or do I
yeah.
lick him away?
Yeah, and like when we heal things, I've learned that it changes our energy and vibration. We're no longer resonating at that level or that situation, and then our environment changes. So that's kind of like what I help people with life review, also as a doula, help them
Oh,
with the
great.
life review and things like that. Yeah.
It's funny, Jennifer Schaefer, who I worked with, she's this medium and our Hacking the Afterlife podcast. She does something called the Medium Minute, where she does like a TikTok. And she came upon this term the other day instead of manifestation, because that's what people always talk about. Now, how do I manifest, the Maserati that I want to drive? She called it Wombafest, because if it's coming from love and coming from that place of love, towards a creative idea, you want to Wombafest it rather than manifest it. I thought that was pretty interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a funny term, but I mean that idea of, as a doula, do you tell people about the research that shows that nobody dies and
Yep.
everybody goes home?
Yeah. And that's part of what I'm doing with the podcast is I bring on some doulas and we talk about it and I try to help connect them to, the near death experience to doulas and, have that information out there so they can kind of bridge the gap, between that and maybe start thinking about, well, maybe there isn't, it's not an end and maybe there is a beyond, because if there's so much research out there with like the ions and the near death experiencers,
Sure.
how can you overlook that, right? Negate
No,
it.
and that idea that we have filters on the brain, and so Jennifer and I did a very unusual podcast some years ago with Jack Tracy,
Mm,
Tracey. If you look up Jack Tracy and my name, you'll find it. But Jennifer and I interviewed a friend of mine's father who was in a hospice care, and he was just weeks to live, and he had Alzheimer's. But I didn't tell her anything about that. I just said, I want to talk to my friend Jack. And she said, oh, I'm getting that he's on the planet, but off the planet, not quite here, not quite there. And I said, that's correct. And then I got him to identify me because he knew me since I was a teenager. And, like he had a dog that he used to feed toast to. So those kinds of details, she said, he's showing me feeding a dog toast. Is that right? That allowed me to clarify who Jack was. And then I asked him, I said, so what's it like for you? He said, well, 90% of me, my conscious energy, is already back home. I'm already doing all the things you can do when you get off stage, which are many. I said, do you ride a bike? Because he used to ride those like 100 miles a day. He said, everything but that. I can do almost everything. And I said, so why are you still here? And he said, well, it's like leaving a leg in the pool. You're out of the pool, but one part of you is still in the pool. And I
mm,
said, why is that? And he said, I'm waiting for my grandchildren to say goodbye to me.
oh,
And then they did. That week they came and he passed like a week later. But we were having this conversation. So Jennifer has clients like a family whose son is in a coma. And so she's able to talk to his higher self and have a conversation with him. And so in this case, it was somebody in hospice care in Arizona, but we're having a conversation with his higher self to say, well, what's it like? So I just want people to realize that, especially with dementia patients or Alzheimer's, they are fully aware of everything you're doing and saying, but the
I'm getting
computer's
chills when you're
not.
saying that.
But the computer's not. You know what I'm saying? It's like your computer with the files are not working. You're like, why doesn't my computer work? Well, the files are down. Okay. But their higher self knows everything you're saying, everything you're doing, all of that awareness. But and of course, I'm sure you're aware of that music is one of the last things to go. And so if you can come in and sing a song, you're going to connect with your loved one in a way that, you didn't realize you could, because because even though all the other files are down, apparently singing and playing music and getting them to sing, and you can't say, do you remember the song? Because the answer is no, I don't remember who you are. But if you start singing, whatever it is.
Yeah. And even when they don't feel or they don't seem to be coherent, they can still hear you. They can hear you, and then they're out of the body, they're hovering over the body, so they can see what's going on, and
Sure.
then before they go over onto their side. So a lot of people may think that, that doesn't exist and that they're gone, and I think that hurts the healing process of letting somebody go, to not know the truth. So,
So Dr. Grayson, I mentioned him earlier. He has a public talk on YouTube called "Is Consciousness Produced by the Brain?" Did it back in 2011, and at the end of the talk, he talks about the statistics: 70% of UK hospice workers who have dementia patients report spontaneous recovery, full recovery of memory just prior to passing. So sudden, and they call it terminal lucidity, but it's like suddenly they know everybody in the room. I'm fine. It's almost like and you think, oh, they've rebounded, but it's literally they're saying goodbye. But they're able to, sit up Dorothy and Wizard of Oz. You were there. You were there. That sort of thing. And so that's also an aspect of it. So when you're dealing with as death doulas who are dealing with people who are seeing people who aren't in the room, if you can just allow that they're seeing into another dimension that we can't, then you can ask them questions. Well, what do they look like? Who are they? And if you don't judge the answer, you'd be surprised how much information you can say. So can I ask that person a question? And would you tell us what's your name and what's your relationship to my friend here? And so what are you hanging around for? Does he owe you money? Or are you guys friends? Because of
right.
course they're friends. Yes, he owes me money. I'm waiting for him so I can shake him into the tortures of the day. Anyway,
Yeah.
funny stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I do want to kind of wrap this up. So it's been great. Anything else that you might want to share before we kind of wrap it up?
Well, you can find me at richmartini.com is where I have links to all of my books and films and stuff like that. I have 3 movies on Gaia or Amazon Prime, Flipside, Talking to Bill Paxton, my old friend, and Hacking the Afterlife. And then if you want to do a guided meditation like we did, which includes a lot more places to go around the universe, they're about 90 minutes to 2 hours. You can find me at richardmartini.com. And I supply everybody with an MP3 of the session and a transcript and a copy of one of my books. It's a fun thing to do and kind of an adventure as we saw. And I'll be curious how you reflect on it later on, or if anybody out there wins the lottery with 5 and 2.
Yeah, I'll definitely probably get some, because I find that there's like an energy lag, at least a day. Like tomorrow, I'll start getting some integration and like a lag, so I'll probably get more on it tomorrow.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so
Okay, cool. Well, it was fun talking to him, and I
yeah,
appreciate you, bringing him forward. What fun.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Now, where do you see your work going, like legacy work? How do you see everything playing out for the future generations?
Well, that's interesting. I have 13 books, and I can tell you, as a filmmaker, I've written and directed like 10 theatrical features. And so I was, fully invested in the rubric of what happens or how you do that. But at some point, I'd written this book, I had made this documentary Flipside, and then I wrote a book to go with it. And all the publishers who looked at it said, yeah, this is great, but who are you? We've never heard of you. And I just decided, okay, I'm not going to wait for somebody to say it's okay. And I started self-publishing back then. That was 13 books ago. And I was, shockingly enough, I got invited on Coast to Coast. And once I went on Coast to Coast Radio, my books went to #1, in their genre, in whatever, Kindle and stuff like that. And so I'm continuing to do that. I'm filming all the time, and I'll be taking some excerpts from some of those sessions and turning them into, a story of like, here's a journey that a person went on. They're mind-bending stuff. And I've also got more documentaries that Gaia wants me to put out. So, and then Jennifer and I are actually going on Coast to Coast or Beyond Belief on Gaia in February. So
Beautiful.
Yeah, cool.
Beautiful.
How about you?
Me, I'm just hoping that, people will take things away, from this which will help them to see, and maybe change or tweak their mindset, and
We can only hope.
yep. So
Very good.
that's what my hope is. And then just to help people, with the dualist and, things like that.
Thanks for what you do.
You're welcome. And you as well.
All right, Laura.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you and me. We're not the one and only. It's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, baby. Say it isn't so, baby. It's the truth, don't you know, baby? We're all consciousness, living out our reason in a world of endless stories. Said from the beginning, we race to the finish as we face the harsh reality. We don't remember